Hello, welcome to the TransCreator on Ben TV. My name's Madison Moffat and my pronouns are she and her. And we're broadcasting from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, whose sovereignty was never ceded. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And I'm joined here by Celesty P. Wherever I go, I see Celesty. I was at the Revel Gala held by TGV. I was at the Trans Sisters United Transgender Day Remembrance Vigil. And all of a sudden, there was Celesty reading a poem which had us all thinking in unison about the importance of that vigil. And on another day, I was at the affirmation station, TGV's affirmation station. And lo and behold, there was Celesty. So I'm seeing her around the place. And so I got around to discussing with her what her experiences are as of late. And it seems to me that speaking with Celesty today would be a great way of talking through the experiences of people who are to a certain extent new to being out and about in the queer community of Melbourne and discovering opportunities for themselves to be creative in various ways, and how that can then bring about new opportunities and new ways of feeling included and happy. Welcome, Celesty.
Thank you, Madison, for introducing me. That was a lovely introduction.
And just to cap that off, your pronouns?
My pronouns are she, they, and I have no preference to either she or they. It's quite gender fluid, actually. It depends on the day sometimes.
I thought we'd start the conversation by talking around your experiences, say as a child and adolescent, and then perhaps early adulthood, around being creative. How did you experience yourself as a creative person?
As a child, because there were not many rules, I was always drawing on picture books and drawing everywhere. And something about me sparked that creativity. And when I started doing artwork, especially in schools, it was quite graded. And because it was quite graded, I felt quite constrained to it.
Yes.
And then I found another outlet, which was music. And the thing is that I love music so much, but there was a lot of exam systems over there. So as an adolescent, I was like trying to have this graded music exams, trying to pass in everything. But unfortunately, even though I was doing well in music and art, I didn't really find the passion to it. I didn't really find that creative outlet. And it's when I discovered that I needed to know who I am in the first place before I understand what creativity is. And yes, discovering who I was took me some time. And then with that, I was able to woven an art piece by myself. So some of the art piece could be writing, not just for music.
Surely also part of the self-discovery would be the engagement in the art.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's almost the potential there for a snowballing effect. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think maybe just if it's not for the audience that I'm creating this art or this creative thing, it's actually to understand who I am. And that in itself is an art, like discovering myself is an art, I felt. But yeah, having that outlet within outlet was kind of like an inception, but not with a deception.
Then, having done artistic and creative work in order to discover who you are, you better understand who you are, and then that flows back into the work.
For me, including community participation.
Yes.
So I really like being part of the community, and I recently became part of the queer community because I identify myself into the non-binary space.
Yes.
And being gender diverse, and like I was trying my hardest to fit in the community, like with my normal community, but when I was able to find like a specific trans and gender diverse community, I felt that I just didn't fit in. I also belonged there.
Right.
So that was, for me, one thing that I was able to both discover myself and as well as being part of the community that led to the creative outlet.
At what point and in what way could you share with us a moment where the creativity or outlet started really giving you this notion, this idea, this understanding that you might be, for instance, something along the lines of genderqueer?
I think what I did was a lot of experimentation with clothes.
Right.
So I I was always looking at the men's section because they were always in discount. So I kept having a lot of like experimentation with clothes. And I was at the affirmation station because I was donating all my clothes that were kind of like femme type. And
Yes.
then I was like buying the other like mask kind of clothes. So I kind of like, as an adolescent, I didn't have that kind of fluidity.
Yes.
But like as I came to an adulthood, I was able to discover that I'm not just fitting into one type of box. I have like multiple fashion sense probably throughout the day,
Right.
as well as something that I felt as an adolescent, that kind of the creative outlet later on in life as an adult.
How would you say that your creative pursuits led you to your interactions with the queer community?
When the creative outlet was through music as a child, and then I was able to meet a lot of community over there, as well as I did some kind of trauma-informed kickboxing from Conscious Combat Club, as well as like I have like a mentor in the social works team who starts like doing a lot of like both creativity as well as social work.
Yes.
So I was trying to like experiment along the way, as well as my creative outlet in terms of, I think for me, writing was something that I was able to do well.
Yes.
And for me, specifically, like engaging with networking, like you mentioned in the gender reveal gala.
Yes.
Seeing other artists, getting inspired by them, and then coming back was something that, I take in with me. So it's both a creative lens for both inward and outward that comes back together. So that's something that I really enjoy doing, and something creative as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, creativity isn't just that. It's not just one-off thing. It's thinking out of the box. So for
Yes.
me, identifying myself out of the box took me some time.
What I just keyed into there with your answer was you included kickboxing,
Yeah.
which is I support wholly.
Yeah.
I mean, doing sport is part of being part of an engaged and creative and culture. How did that make you, perhaps more confident to engage further in community?
With the kickboxing, it like removed all my stress, and I wore like these rainbow socks. So kind of like I pretended that I'm kickboxing the homophobia, and like that's getting out of my way. So like it helped like both engage with the community, as well as whatever fear I had, whatever everything, I just placed it on that pads. I imagined that was the problem, and I kickboxed my way in.
Yeah.
So that's something that I was able to have a stress relief, and at the same time have connection with both my body and like with the community as well. So it had that triple layer connection to it.
Listening to you, that takes imagination.
Yeah.
To think that is what I am striking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an imaginative pursuit, not just a sport.
Yeah.
As the way that you're describing it.
Taking from the imaginative, I also do like improv comedy, which like I can on the spot just jam it up, whatever I'm authentically feel like, whatever is there. So for example, they give up a topic in the audience, for example, stars or plants, and then we make up a story together. And there's no right or wrong. There's like a yes and, like, yes, we support it. And I could be a dinosaur and someone else will come like yes and to it. Yeah. So I feel like with the community, there's a lot. When I go in the community outside of that comfort zone, I feel like every time I do something, there's no yes and to it. So that wasn't a safe space for me sometimes.
Oh, interesting.
So this creative outlet wherein I could be myself authentically, and someone supporting me towards that two mutual grounds is when my outlets really come in together piece by piece to make a whole fabricated picture.
As a result of it being improv rather than some other theatrical pursuit, there's this, as you say, this yes and, the openness of yes and. Yeah. And then that gives you that opportunity. Yeah. So how does that feel in that moment? How do you make decisions when you're doing improv, when you're given that opportunity because I'm giving you the yes and?
Sometimes I feel like some communities think, okay, I'm with one L, or that's just me who I am, which is a box, which is great. Yeah. But also for me, particularly, I'm not just one thing. I can be flowing thing, I'm just floating around anywhere within the alphabets, probably. That plus is just, it keeps going on and on. nobody fully understands that, this is something as an individual experience.
Yes.
It's something that we create and we craft for ourselves. So that creativity is like, this is my part, this is my art. It's, if people judge, it's their judgment, but I'm not going to judge so harshly about myself in that way. So that's something that I felt, trying the yes and, even if for example, I can't hate myself because it's homophobic.
Yeah.
So if that yes and is there within the community, it's like, okay, so I am supported, I am here, I'm okay to be authentic.
Yes.
So that's something that I felt was very comfortable.
You were also talking in terms of poetry at one point with me. Would you like to expand on what poetry means to you in terms of your creative pursuits?
I had a problem with like over explaining everything to other people so that I could be understood. And in poetry, it's like less words, and then people have to make up their own understanding. So for me, that was like an escape route, because I can use less words so that other people can figure out what the answers are. So that was my creative outlet over there. And with those few words, we take those threads, like different small threads, we crochet it in, and then either you can take that crocheted piece and you can make it any shape you like with your own understanding, your own perspective. So we have the creative outlet from both the audience as well as the person doing poetry.
It's the same joy and freedom, but from completely different processes. The yes and of improv versus the limiting of words in poetry. Yeah. But it's coming to the same joy. Yeah,
I think maybe that's how I find joy, in like the small things in life. And sometimes it's what society tells, like it's like an escape from the society. Like it's not this rigid, structured place that, okay, monologue, monotonous, like monochrome, and something very colorful, both the queer space, the multicultural space, and everything onto it. So that's the dichotomy that I felt with that joy.
Can I suggest, it also sounds cheeky.
Does it?
It sounds to me like there's a natural cheekiness to you, that those opportunities, answering the and, or limiting the word so that, and I think this is almost a quote, other people have to make sense of it.
Yes.
There's a cheekiness to that. Am I correct?
I think you're absolutely correct. And then it doesn't matter what everyone else thinks sometimes. The opinion of you matters the most, because the self-reflection also is a creative lens. So when I read my own poetry, the same day it's something else it means, and the same day it means a different thing. So even my own poem has like, within the same person who wrote it, has different like energies to it.
And to hear you talk of that, the word that comes to mind is play.
Yeah.
So it's a cheekiness and it's a playfulness.
Yes. It's a theatre by itself.
Were you like that much as a child or as an adolescent? Were you known to be cheeky?
I actually became cheeky as an adult, because I was very nice and obedient girl. Always went to school, always on the front, but I'm not questioning anything. And then as I came to Australia, it was something like a transformation, because I realized that, I can do whatever I want, wherever I want. And that's how I was able to become more cheeky, being more play, like all the creativity, like I've already learned as a child in Dawson, that just pushed through like a pedal when I came to Australia, which was quite interesting, because many people come to India to discover themselves, and I had to get out of India to discover myself, which was kind of like the two different celestial worlds by itself. So
I am surprised rather that you weren't cheeky as a child, but then I understand it, because I think back to my own background. And sometimes I was encouraged, sometimes I was heavily discouraged. That level of creativity wasn't necessarily appreciated in 70s, Australian outer suburbia. Could you describe the culture that you came from as a child and how it might have influenced you to then break out when you came here?
That's a very good question, because I feel that everyone has their own definition of what culture means.
Indeed.
And then for some, it relates to more community for sure. Yeah. And because I come from like a very collectivistic culture from India, I felt like I really liked being part of this community, but also at the same time I felt a bit restricted. But when I came to Australia, like the self-discovery part and creative part, I was really happy being alone, but also at the same time, because I'm so used to being around community, I felt really hard to like engage when I came to Australia.
Right.
From both a queer perspective, multicultural perspective, and everything, like this minority stress came into place.
Yes. Okay.
Both in the workplace, in education settings, everything in. But then when I find people who are both like-minded, you not just feel like you belong there, you just feel like you're just connected within that space.
Yes.
And for me, I like being part of, like, I can go back to India knowing that, you know what, I found community in both places.
Yes.
And in both places, if I feel restricted in any ways, I always have my creative outlet. So that's kind of what I'm trying to bridge in from the two celestial worlds that I just mentioned to you. Sometimes that frustration, like, of course I can't, when I say kickboxing, I can't punch somebody else. That's not what it is.
Yes.
But like when it comes to a creative realm wherein I direct or challenge my rage towards the other perspective,
Yes.
and challenging what my frustration is onto a creative space, as well as knowing that all of these frustrations are going to be temporary.
Yeah.
I have to like pause and then move on, pause and move on. That frustration that we all face, and we can relate to any culture, that frustration and restriction.
Yes.
And sometimes the confirmation biasness comes to it, where like, and the group think when everybody thinks the same, but you don't think, even if you're a part of the community. So navigating that challenge for me was a bit like of a dilemma, as well as knowing what to say and when to say,
Yes.
how to say. If I'm not able to say it, put in a creative space.
Yes.
So that's how I'm able to channel my rage into it.
Is there anything that you could think of specifically that about creative and cultural outlets that specifically that helps you relieve that tension?
I think specifically for my cultural perspective, the mantras, like whatever, like it's kind of like what I've said, like they have this, if I have so many kind of negative thoughts, I kind of reframe it to a positive thoughts, like very culture specific to it. And the other thing is when it comes to creative outlet, like I think I tried my best to pull out everything to it, specifically creativity. I think poetry, music, art, as well as learning from other queer artists, queer people, as well as in the community. So those are the two specific perspectives that I've ventured in.
Yeah. Could you speak a little more to that, about how witnessing how other gender diverse and queer, broader queer artists might have guided you or helped you?
So in terms of like my identity, like I think for sure, like when we see other artists, I think I've seen most of the performances on Gender Reveal Party when Gender Reveal Gala, where I'm seeing all the creative artists there, and I'm like, oh wow, they're using both. It's just like how we use both perspectives to art as well as the identity, dancing off each other.
Yes.
Being in a performative space where it is what it is. There's no rules. There is rules for creativity, but we can bend those rules. We can bend the gender. We can bend the stereotypes. And that's how we can, as a community, break off this homophobia, transphobia, and all the phobias, hopefully, to the end. And especially when I came to the trans Day of Remembrance, having like everybody coming together and everybody like as a community just looking at it from one lens as to how we remember those who lost their lives because of these phobias, knowing that they, if it weren't for this phobia or any of these societal pressures onto them, they would have been here alive, they would have been here thriving, there would have been so many things that would have happened that would have, as a community, came together. So so I felt like getting inspired from the art, using that art, and also like whatever in my capacity, helping the other queer members, the other community. That's what I was thinking of as a triangle. So I'll just be reading one of the poems that I created. It's called Colored Queer. In a world stripped bare, where colors fade to grey, colored queer rise, shaking dust from yesterday. They pack their dreams, wrapped in pride and pain, fleeing a homeland where love feels like a chain. They journey to a place where rainbows wash the sky. But oh, the irony, those colors come with a lie. In a swirl of hues, they search for a safe embrace, yet find themselves concealed, lost in a crowded space. Truths held hostage, in shadows they must dwell, echoes of their past, whispers of silent hell. They fled from the darkness, seeking light and cheer, only to discover the shadows linger near, hearts unhealed, carrying scars of the light. Connections yearned to fight their way to the light. So they rise, they roar, with voices strong and proud, reclaiming their colors, breaking free from the crowd. For every hue is vibrant, every story deserves to be told. They stand together, fearless, fierce, and bold. In a world that tries to wash them away, they wear their colors bright, standing tall come what may, for the colors that they light. Colored queer, dancing through the storm, finding strength in each other, in every shade they transform. So here's to the journey, to the love that they seek, from colorless homelands to a future unique. They are more than just whispers, more than shadows and fears. They are the thunder, the rain, and all the loud cheer, a spectrum of stories woven into the night. Colored queer, they're here to ignite.
What do you hope for the future in terms of your own efforts and contributions that you might wish to make?
For me, the most important contribution and everything is just whatever voices are there to be heard, and exactly what you're thinking, you know, other artists voice out who they are, what they are. And then itself, like for me, I will get inspired with what you do, and I would be part of like helping other people, just being like voicing it out. So it's that echoes of voices that can break down the voices that can't be the voiceless. So voice first, and then using that voice to make music, to make other creative outlets, and sometimes even the artistic outlet towards whatever I've grown up to be, self-discovery, community, culture, perspective, all of that together, as well as the striving for structural change in a very incremental manner is something that I was hoping to do. And I think the first thing that I was able to do successfully is just to write poems and try to talk about it. It was something that I started off very slowly.
Any advice that nonetheless that you would give people who might want to start on the same journey that you found yourself on?
What I am today, if I were to speak to my younger self, I would definitely be like, find your own rhythm to the melody, find your own path, find your own, just don't be too harsh on yourself because the world is harsh enough. So painting that icing over the broken cake, because imperfection's beauty. So even if the cake is the most tastiest, if it doesn't look amazing, you can still put the icing on it, and that's what it is. So making your voice, you hearing your own voice, because like if the whole society just puts it down and you can't hear your own voice, how do you know what voice to actually say?
Now let's think about that broken cake. The icing's over it, you know, and obviously that's just smoothing over to the extent you feel the need to, not necessarily smoothing over for others. But what about those cracks?
I honestly have a perfectionist tendencies. Like I need to be this, and then embracing my own imperfection, and then that icing. Like, yes, I'm imperfect, and at the same time, my voice is heard, and I can use that voice to a very creative space and being inspired, getting inspired, and also being my own muse to that was something that is both the icing, the cake, and that imperfect cake. Does the kind of answer the the icing? Like, speaking of icing, the Iceberg Foundation does a really incredible job towards like speaking on behalf of the marginalized community and like voicing it out to it. So that's one thing that I'm very grateful to encounter, and also like somehow being part of.
That's being and to a certain extent queer generally, as part of being trans. Many will also refer to themselves as being gender queer. It's about not adhering to the niceties and the expectations of a mainstream society or a polite society. We're just ourselves.
And then also like reinforcing that I'm queer enough, I'm Indian enough, I'm all of that enough, not even like for the society, but for our own selves, of that internalized homophobia, racism, all of that internalized things that crack up our cake, just remove that and then serve our own cake.
And within like the trans creator, we always talk about people being creative enough as well. You are trans enough, you are creative enough.
Yes, absolutely. Remove that icing.
One last thought too, along those lines, is that part of the manifesto, we playfully call it, within the trans creator includes that the TGDNB culture, that the mainstream culture relies on the TGDNB culture, not the other way around. Do you have any thoughts or experiences around that you'd like to share?
When we first think of the word trans, my first encounter was always someone who's gone through surgery, someone who's done HRT. So I always felt like, okay, so that isn't my space. Well, this isn't my space. So where is exactly my space? But now you mentioned having the NB also part of the space that shares that umbrella, that queer umbrella, the trans umbrella, that kind of like protects us from the shame that, society pours in, that umbrella protectively. That NB, like specifically, especially when there are so many questioning, like, okay, which mold do I fit in, not knowing that they're their own mold, and then they just need to be with other molds instead. So that umbrella by itself is easily widely misunderstood, both in the straight community as well as the non-conforming community.
And their understanding of that is dependent on us.
We're
not depending on them for that cultural understanding. And I think that's a really beautiful, specific example of what we're trying to communicate there.
And also, like you mentioned, representation matters. So it's not just one person represent the whole community. It's just like different communities coming together to show what they are.
Do you feel that everyone is inherently creative because they're human?
We as human are creative. All of us do have like some innate quality of creativity. It's just to discover that takes time. And being with people who enable you to discover that and support you, like the and like everything all around it comes to a feeling that we can actually enhance and become better artists ourselves, because we have our own canvas to paint. That is the canvas of life. Paint it, being creative with it, and hearing that inner voice, inner child, inner channel, and then it comes onto that paper after that.
You've been with me, Madison Moffat, as part of the Trans Creator on Bent TV, and I've been with Celesty P. Thank you very much for watching.